River, maybe frequently seeing a camp, the river level is evidently low there. You can see more of the riverbank and not a whole lot of the water. And this has been a big problem here from around St. Louis all the way south to the mouth of the Mississippi River down in Louisiana. So we've been dealing with the Mississippi River water crisis. We're calling it that because this is a $20 billion estimated impact on the U.S. economy. And again, this has kind of been a quietly developing and evolving situation, but we're dealing with record low water levels from Memphis to Greenville. And there are areas where the barge traffic is just basically parked and waiting for the river levels to rise. Other areas, there are some barges that are able to travel, but in a lot of cases, the load has been reduced by about a fifth, by 20%. So there's less drag and they don't sit as low in the water. And AccuWeather's founder and CEO, Dr. Joel Myers, has estimated a $20 billion with a B economic impact tied to this. So again, this looks a lot different than a lot of the weather disasters that we often think of that have a significant price tag. But this is still a big deal here, and it comes at a critical time for shipping the harvest and the grains and corn and so forth down the Mississippi River. And again, this impacts many areas in the central and east central U.S., virtually all of the heartland, most of it at least, overwhelming majority, is an area that is drained by the Mississippi River, and that's a huge point of thoroughfare. So this is the lowest the river's been in St. Louis since 2013. Probably won't exceed that threshold, but in New Orleans, it's the lowest it's been since 2008, and in Memphis and Greenville, the record lowest in decades of weather data. Here we have the river gauge in Greenville. We bottomed out at 5.26 feet back at the beginning of the week, and the previous record lowest was 6.7 feet in 1964. So we were more than a foot and a half or so below the previous record. And you can see over the past 30 days, most of the rivers that feed into the Mississippi River, the tributaries, have been in an area here where there's below average precipitation. Huge impacts here to commerce and obviously the farming world, the agricultural industry. There is typically a decline in the river level from late summer into the early fall. We bottom out around October, early November, but we're much lower than normal for right now. So looking ahead, November, we expect the plains to be generally drier. Parts of the Ohio Valley may be a bit above average, and into December. Similar theme there, so we probably have to wait until the new year when we actually make some progress. What lengths would you go to make it to your friend's wedding? Well, tonight on Prime, we're going to show you how bridesmaids crossed a raging river for their friend's big day.
I want to back up right here where he first started doing an analogy here. Um, 20 billion.
About a fifth by 20%, so there's less drag and they don't sit as low in the water. And AccuWeather's founder and CEO, Dr. Joel.
A $20 billion event that is occurring right now, that if it is not reversed, it will affect commerce, and eventually commerce will affect taxpayers, because it'll be the taxpayers that fit the bill on something like this, because it'll be considered the same thing as a hurricane or a tornado or any other kind of natural catastrophe that can occur in conjunction to this particular slow moving crisisness that's occurring right now. God showed me that the Mississippi River was going to begin to start running dry in the early 1990s, that most people only thought was some sort of delirious, delusional ideal. But whenever we went through what we went through in '88, after a supernatural event had happened in my personal life, I knew then that God was not bluffing. He was not lying. He was not joking. He was not just agitating the ideal towards various things happening here in America, to where if you can go to the other side of the planet, you got countries over there that are literally getting entirely too much water. Flooding has been a big concern with a lot of other countries. Well, you may be asking, what's going on? Well, first of all, what's going on is the signs that we're supposed to be paying close enough attention to towards identifying that we are living in the days of sorrow. We are living in the days where it talks about woe be unto the inhabitants here upon to the planet. We are living in the last days of the manifestation of seeing Christ opening up the seals. We are living in the last days towards, on one side of the perspective, it's going to be wars, rumors of wars, commotions, um, bad weather events, earthquakes, tornadoes, droughts, floods, diseases, famines, etc. But on the other side of the perspective, we was already supposed to have been involved in a great, great spiritual revival that would reverse all this towards seeing men and women, boys and girls, turn their hearts and lives back over to Christ, or turn their lives over to Christ for the first time, and change this set of dynamics that we're involved in right now. That basically the resistance movers that began back in the late 80s. Actually, it began in the part of the beginning 80s that led into the later 80s. But if we don't reverse this, this is only going to drastically get worse, because if we think that we're seeing the last of this in regards towards droughts and major water reserve lakes and watersheds and et cetera drying up, we haven't seen nothing yet. If we don't throw a big red flag to this in the most urgency form, on not only the physical form but also the spiritual form, because God's already done showed me that next year, pertaining to the droughts and the water, is even going to get worse. And why it's getting drier over here, it could actually be getting wetter somewhere else, because the Mother Nature is off its balance right now, because of what we have done to the planet up underneath our feet and what we're doing to the atmosphere below and above the clouds. And until people wake up to that, we're only going to see destruction like we've never even begin to ever imagine. Like I said, they can run barges right now, those that they have to get out, but what they're having to do is be out a whole lot more labor in taking one barge that's full, using another barge that's empty, and basically transferring the grain from half of that barge over to the other barge. That way it lightens the first barge, because some of them barges goes down in the water 27 to 30 foot deep if they're fully loaded, depending on what they're loaded with. So you can lighten the barge up to where the barge is basically about 14, 15 feet in the water. You're not carrying as much, but you can still move up and down the water. That's one of the reasons why all the barges right now are full, is because they've been having to use too many barges towards being able to move either grain, coal, or gravel up and down the river. And they didn't have enough barges, and basically a great deal of those barges are parked on the side of the rivers for one or two reasons. Either A, they're too full, or B, they're full and they don't have nowhere to put them right now because of various issues with our transporting industries. And there's no doubt, whenever you have to go to the lengths of doing what they're having to do, as far as taking one percentage of the load down the river, because you still got to have the same crew of men, you still got to use the same amount of basically the same amount of fuel, either going up the river or down the river, but your capacity has dropped almost in half, or possibly in half, pertaining to your load. So at the end of the day, guess what? Instead of you making money, you just lost money. Why? Because now instead of you taking a whole load, you're taking a half a load. It will probably get fuller this fall and this winter. It always does, pertaining to our wet seasons. It usually comes into these areas long about. Actually, we're actually past due about 3 to 4 weeks, pertaining to a lot of big heavy rains that come into this area. But it'll get fuller than what it is now during the winter months. But the thing about it is, if it don't reach that capacity level of what it should by spring, then you're having to do it all over again towards what is going to follow in regards to the patterns next year, in regards towards the river already be partially low, or maybe extensively low, moderately low, whichever word you want to use, that it already be some severe problems going on that will only exacerbate the problem and add insult to injury if we have, in which God, like I said, God has showed me that these problems that we're seeing right now pertaining to the forces of Mother Nature are only going to tragically get worse until we can wake up to what's happening pertaining to the adversary that's coming down in great wrath. And if he's not coming down in the form of a tornado or a hurricane, or coming down in the form of pestilences or a disease or laziness or drugs or gun violence, he can come down in the sense by holding back the moisture and allowing for it to get super dry towards a drought. These are all clashes that's going on in the supernatural world that you and I can't see. But we know, according to the Bible, they're going to happen. And we know that that's exactly what's happening. No, you can't see it, but you can feel it. You can sense it. You can see the repercussions, the consequences on account of it whenever it does happen, regardless whether it comes in the form of a 200-mile-an-hour wind, a hurricane, or a drought, or fires, or whatever. I mean, whenever the tornadoes broke out last year, 2 weeks before Christmas, there's no explanation towards science saying that the reason why America warms up to almost 90 degrees or above during the winter months is because of the sun. If the sun was producing that type of heat, you and I would not be able to go out into it without getting physically burnt. I'm talking about severely burnt, especially during the winter solstice, whenever we're tilted away from the sun at its furthest peak, where we have the shortest days of the year, which is supposed to be the coldest of all cold, because in reality, even though the earth has moved closer to the sun during the winter, because we're on the opposite side of the earth, we're actually further away. So logically, it should be cold during that period of time. But because things has become abnormal, because the cold doesn't have the strength that it's supposed to have, because the hot is more hotter and things is being disproportionalized, it's basically a tug of war game that we're seeing between hot and cold, cold and hot, and between wet and dry, dry and wet. And I mean, we're basically seeing all these major forces of nature that's basically causing a calamity with the Homo sapiens down here up on the planet like they've never really experienced before. And it's only going to get worse before it gets better. That's what I continue to keep saying. It's only going to get worse. So yeah, it may pick up a little bit. It may quiet down because the barges are moving halfway up and down the river. But once more, if that river don't come up like it's supposed to in the month of December, January, and February, next year, they're going to sure enough be in trouble if you keep up with the charts on how the water table is. So please pray for this situation. $20 billion, and that's probably a conservative number right there. depending upon just exactly how long that the river, mighty Mississippi, stays in the condition that it's in right now, because it's abnormal, first of all, to see the river get low, especially whenever you've seen the river get low like this 5 or 6, 7 times in a lifetime. It's very, very abnormal to see a body of water like this to get that low that many times. So whenever they talk about global warming, whenever they talk about environmental crisis, it's real. It's very, very real. And now we're paying the consequences for not uh, buying into this reality 25, 30, 40, maybe even 50 years ago. That now it's caught up with us. It's caught up with us, and all these climate deniers need to wake up to what's happening, because if they don't, um, as far as I'm concerned, you're part of the people that was leading everybody off into the mouth of the volcano, and it's because of y'all that has brought this hardship up into so many people's lives. And I'm essentially talking to the baby boomers, but it's not just all the baby boomers. It's also some of the young people too that bought into this lie, the same lie that the petroleum OPEC was putting out to the world, that all global warming isn't real. Y'all are using your imaginations. All this, all that. Yeah, that's like your antichrist people, by saying that they're against Christ, or that Christ isn't real. You got people out there that are literally agnostic, they're atheist, and they refuse to believe that God is real. They're antichrist. They refuse to believe in the supernatural. They refuse to believe that there's consequences in not being obedient to the supernatural. And those people, if you listen to them, they'll lead you off into the mouth of the volcano, because those are the people that's trying. They know that themselves has basically sold their soul to the devil, and they're trying to collect that many more people. That way, their numbers game will go up in regards towards the more people that they bamboozle, the more people that they confuse, the more people that they deceive. They feel like that this is going to be a higher number that they'll be able to play with one day in the great white throne judgment, which ain't going to mean a cotton picking thing to the Creator. Because ultimately, whenever it's all said and done with, because of the mercy coming from the Creator, it will be the meek that will inherit the earth, those that have followed after the ways of the Lord. Not saying that they're perfect, but they believe and they're striving towards doing morally and physically and spiritually that in which what has been commanded for us to obtain. It will be the meek that will inherit the earth, not the demonic, not the wicked, not the deniers, not the agnostics, but God's chosen people. Good luck to all of us, and shalom.